So I heard you just got the keys to your new classroom. We'll get in the car. We're going to Target. It's gonna be so much fun. We're gonna hit up the dollar section. I heard the deals there are so good. Psych, we are not going to Target, but we are gonna talk about how to set up your brand new first classroom ever.
Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Cecilia Tamez and I'm an experienced educator and consultant. And I help passionate history teachers feel confident and competent by sharing tips, strategies, and advice to help you teach like an influential educator. If you enjoy learning about these topics, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Okay, so first of all, congratulations on your new teaching job. Now let's talk about this classroom of yours. I've seen time and time again that a good percentage of first-year teachers place a lot of emphasis on preparing their classroom. And I mean, why shouldn't you? You're gonna spend more time there than you do anywhere else. Plus, having been a first-year teacher myself, at some point I realized that setting up my classroom is just kind of part of the mental process of really stepping into this new role and this new career and profession you're about to embark on. So in this video, I actually wanted to share how my classroom was set up and kind of explain the logic behind why the setup was the way it was. There has to be a purpose to the way you create your classroom environment. Now, don't get me wrong, Pinterest classrooms are the bomb. But as a first-year teacher, you want to make sure that your classroom setup actually aligns with your procedures, your classroom needs, your students' needs, that it's practical, and that it allows for safety practices to be in place. Okay, so let's talk about the entrance of your classroom. The entrance of your classroom is like your calling card, okay? It's the first impression that your students will get and that anyone will get when they're walking into your classroom. You actually want to make sure that your entrance is presentable, it's exciting, it really welcomes your students because, as I said before, it's the first impression that your students will have not only of your classroom and the environment they're gonna work in, the energy that you project as an educator, but also what you're like as a teacher and as a human being. You want to make sure that your classroom door is clearly identifiable, so it's labeled with your name, your grade level, your room number, just to make sure that there's no confusion about whether your students are in the correct place. As a personal preference, I also like putting motivational decor on my door or around my door area, simply because I feel like it sets the tone and the mindset and the mentality for which not only I expect my students to operate, but the mentality and the energy that they will see me operate from. So if you have like any motivational posters or anything like that, outside at the entrance is the place to put these, because you will find that you actually need your interior classroom space for more purposeful and intentional decor. Now, the second part of setting up your entrance actually happens when your students walk through the actual door. And in this particular location, I swear by the entrance shelf. Now, depending on your grade level, although personally I feel like if you train your students in this procedure, you can honestly adapt this for pretty much any grade level. But most of us teach 40 to 50-minute classes, and so our time is limited, and you don't want to invest 15, 20 minutes of your class passing out materials, collecting materials, cleaning up the classroom at the end of class. All those minutes do eventually add up. And so after my first 2 years teaching, I told myself there has to be an easier way where I can shave off that time and use it more efficiently. To me, that was a waste of instructional time, and that was me not effectively managing my classroom. So what I wanted to do was create a setup which would help me facilitate that procedure so that my students would be able to do this on their own. So in this second entrance area of the classroom, as your students walk in, I highly recommend you set up some sort of station. But in this area, you actually want to set up your most frequently used classroom supplies. As they walk in, once I'm shaking their hand and they're coming into the classroom, they can help themselves to grabbing what they need. I am able to supervise that they're getting the materials that they need because I'm right at the door. I also highly recommend that you adhere some sort of whiteboard or something where you can write down exactly what material they're going to need. Believe it or not, they will get the hang of it, okay? And you are going to love this process because you will never have to run around your classroom like a chicken without a head, picking up and passing out materials. On that same note, I also have a crate right next to my door, and this is like a hanging file crate where I have my students submit their assignments. So as they walk out the door, they can just deposit their assignment by class period. Now in this area, I also recommend that you have emergency info. And so this might include like your lockdown and fire drill procedures. So if you have a map, have it by the door. If you have some sort of system that your school expects you to have, make sure that you have it easily accessible, especially your first year. The worst time to think of where do I find my items is when an event is happening. Now let's talk about our whiteboards and our presentation areas. So you might have a whiteboard, you might have a projector screen, display, or anything like that, but these are focal areas in our classroom. And so we want to maximize how we use these areas because these are areas that our students will be looking at, almost 100% of the time. So for example, in my classroom, I had 2 large whiteboards and 1 bulletin board. Because it was a lot of space, what I did to help my students really organize and compartmentalize the different things that were going on in class, the different processes that were going on in class, I would take painter's tape, and I recommend that you compartmentalize this whiteboard because if you just write information up there, students need to know that there's a designated place and area for the information that they're going to look for. So in this area, I included some highly used content pieces that I knew I was going to refer to frequently throughout my instruction. Now, these highly focal areas of your classroom are also the best place to include scaffolding material. So things like sentence stems, the sequence for their journal or notebook or whatever you have your students keep. Maybe if you're teaching a thematic course, you can section off one part of your whiteboard for helping your students to have a visual to connect the big ideas as they're learning different topics. Maybe a timeline that you're going to refer to consistently throughout the course. Okay, so let's talk about your little kingdom. And of course, I'm talking about your desk area. Now, I know because of technology connections and things like that, where our projector is mounted, sometimes it's not a possibility for us to relocate our desk area because it has to be in a certain place. But ideally, your desk area should be visible from your classroom. That little door on the window, it should be visible from that area. Because if it's not, that means that your students have the visibility in that area. Which means, after having taught for so long, I will tell you they will look out the window and it will drive you up a wall. And not only is this a distraction that is going to just irk you, but also it's so important that you maintain control of that area of visibility out the door for safety reasons, because you need to be able to see if there's some sort of commotion going on outside. The only person who really needs to have visibility to the outside of your classroom is you. Now, I have to confess, I was that teacher that used to collect everything and save everything, and every square inch of my desk area was covered in all these little trinkets. But unfortunately, as time progressed, I found that all that clutter, beautiful as it was in my mind, was causing me stress. That was one. And 2, it wasn't practical. When you do decorate your desk area, you want to make sure that, yes, it represents you. You just want to make sure that you keep the area usable and practical and clutter-free. I do have to share this wisdom nugget. I learned the very hard way that you want to make sure that you have access to all desk areas quickly. I mean, I've had to weave through desks to stop major nosebleeds, break up a fight, help a student that was having a panic attack. So you don't want to be in your desk area like in a little cubbyhole area where you cannot get out fast enough to go and attend to that situation. So it's very important that your arrangement allows for you to access all corners of your room in a lickety-split second. Now, as an educator who understands how challenging it is for us to furnish our classroom with the preposterous budget that the state provides us, especially if we're first-year teachers. If you have an Amazon wish list, feel free to drop it in the comments area below and just kind of let us know what would be like the one dream item you wish, someone could sponsor for your classroom. And you know what? You never know. Some generous soul might watch this video and actually sponsor something from your list. So let's talk about your student desk area. So first of all, you got to know that your desk area is going to change throughout the year. There is no one single way, and hopefully your classroom seating doesn't stay one single way throughout the entire school year, because you should be moving them around or rearranging them for cooperative learning. Throughout your career, you will teach students that are physically handicapped, whether temporarily or permanently, and you want to make sure that you're not having to rearrange the classroom at the last minute just to accommodate that child, because then that student's going to feel like, this teacher wasn't even ready for me. Like, they didn't even think about the fact that a person like me might show up in their classroom. So just a thoughtful and really emotionally intelligent thing to do, to have a space already set up for a student that maybe, is in a wheelchair and is going to need that space to maneuver. You want to make sure that your aisles are wide enough if possible, or that you at least create some area where the student can traverse, or if they have crutches or, something to that extent. Now let's talk about your walls. Walls are this beautiful blank canvas that oftentimes some of us want to plaster with posters and motivational quotes, and there's nothing wrong with that. I have personally worked with folks, and I, for a time, was one of those folks that wanted to have like all these colorful, welcoming, quotes and pictures and whatever, plastered all over my room. But then where are you going to place your instructional scaffolding material? Like the stuff you really need, like your word walls and your visual support and your timeline and all the things that actually matter. Where are you going to display your students' work? And back to my previous statement, having a room that is very richly decorated is just really exciting. But for some students, it might be overwhelming, just visually overwhelming. And again, in your teaching career, you are going to teach all sorts of students. And this stimulation may just be too much for them. And we want to, in order to really create a classroom culture that's welcoming of all our students, we want to make sure that we proactively think about, am I going overboard? Your classroom should look tidy, organized, and welcoming, but you should have space for your actual instructional resources. You should have space for showcasing student work. Don't worry if your classroom looks a little quote unquote bare at the beginning of the school year. As your class starts working on projects and activities, there's nothing cooler for your students than to see their work displayed up around the classroom walls. As the school year starts, I need to focus on other more important things like planning and preparing lessons and figuring out what I'm going to teach and how I'm going to teach it and the most effective way to teach it. And if you actually need help with this, make sure to click the link below where it says Teach Like an Influencer and see how I can actually support you in preparing for the school year. Because if you're tired of having your lessons feel ineffective and that's really bringing down your confidence and that's making you feel like you're spinning your wheels, or you're a brand new teacher and just have no clue where to start creating lessons and just piecing them together, this will help you get on track and feel genuinely prepared and confident in what you're about to teach. Now, if you're interested in any of the items that you saw here on my classroom tour, or any of the items that I use to create a practical and a purposeful classroom, be sure to click the link below where I share some of my favorite products and most useful classroom items that I recommend you have. Now, if you're interested in specifically social studies, scaffolding material, or manipulatives, or visuals for your classroom, be sure to sign up for my newsletter at the link below so you know exactly when those materials become available. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, class dismissed.